graduands, as part of our virtual graduation ceremony, we have created these UWC graduation social media stickers and filters to share on your Instagram and Facebook stories. It's as simple as clicking on your story, snap a pic or create a video, select the sticker icon, search for UWC Grad, select your GIF. Most importantly, tag UWC, use this year's hashtag, and share. Let's not forget about these easy-to-apply UWC filters. Go to our UWC online profile. Click on our Filter tab. Select the Graduation Frame filter. Tap to find your faculty color. Snap a pic or create a video. Most importantly, tag UWC, use this year's hashtag, and share. Congratulations on your well-deserved success. We cannot wait to see your fun UWC virtual graduation moments.
There's a university at the tip of Africa that's right at the top of its game. It's a place with a proud history and legacy, pulled upwards by a future that will not be tamed.
It brims over with powerful ideas that again and again lead to potent action and real change. Since when? 6 decades long, it's been home to groundbreakers, change makers, planet shakers, and it's still going strong.
It's the home of forward-thinking higher learning, homegrown pride and a story still unfurling, independent thought which sparks innovation, mindful global citizens and their perpetual liberation.
Today, this is my home, my community, my springboard, my zone, like iron sharpening iron. Here, my potential is mined, my mind is refined, and my future redefined.
It's our time to learn from our past and our histories, to be the leaders of tomorrow's victories.
It's our time to stand up and step into our light.
To rise with Africa and all the world by our side.
I just want to say to the young ones who now have an opportunity to be vaccinated, please join South Africa, join the continent, join the world, join the whole of society in pushing back the scourge of the viral load caused by the coronavirus. I have been vaccinated through the Pfizer mRNA. I've had both injections. I don't do well with needles. That was my only anxiety, that to be pricked was going to be sore, but there were no side effects. And I'm doing it because I care for the people around me. I care for my family, I care for my colleagues, and I care for myself. So please do it for yourself, do it for your community, and do it for the world until we reach that population immunity. I declare this congregation ceremony of the University of the Western Cape duly constituted. Ndiyazisa ngasemthethweni le nhlangano ye-University yeNtshona Kapa. Ek verklaar hier die vergadering van die Universiteit van die Wes-Kaapland as behoorlik geconstitueer. Professor Pretorius, Rector and Vice Chancellor, UWC graduates, your parents, guardians and loved ones, UWC colleagues, guests. Firstly, our warm congratulations go to the graduates and to your parents and loved ones who helped you get to this moment, particularly at a time when so many sacrifices and hardships have been made and felt. My message to you today, amidst the most serious threats to our lives and livelihoods that we have faced since our liberation in 1994, centers on moral courage. The moral courage that you as graduates of UWC need to summon to enable you to step forward and make your contribution count in the enormous national project of rebuilding our country. We are going through an extraordinary time of change, not only in South Africa, but across the world. COVID-19 has brought challenges and losses that we could not have imagined 18 months ago. Families have lost their livelihoods, and we have lost all friends and families to the virus. Moreover, the pandemic and recent events have made clear that our country is at a crossroads of sorts. Because if we don't make the right choices soon about South Africa's future, we will remain the most unequal country on earth. The looting that we saw in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng last month gave us a shocking glimpse of the state of the country. Yes, criminals took advantage of the breakdown of order, but we also saw people who have lost confidence in our political leadership, who perceive the police as unable to protect their communities, and who are so desperate that they will cast aside a natural inclination to obey the law. The unacceptable conditions under which too many South Africans live are illustrated by some recent statistics. Unemployment is running at 32.6%, and youth unemployment is 46.3%, according to this year's government statistics. In 2020, a Statistics South Africa report showed that more than 6 in every 10 children are multi-dimensionally poor, which means they are deprived in at least 3 of 7 areas in which to measure poverty. The 7 are health, housing, education, water and sanitation, information, nutrition, and protection. People who live middle-class lives take these services for granted. We have 13 million children who receive the government's child grant, which shows not only how necessary the grant is, but also how caregivers eligible for the grant must struggle financially. Another Statistics South Africa report shows that 2.8 million children aged up to 17 experience hunger weekly, and 600,000 do so every day. All this in a country that is one of the most advanced on the continent, with sophisticated banking system, revenue collection, and infrastructure. What does this mean for you, the UWC student, about to become graduates and enter into the world of work. It means having the moral courage to refuse to stand on the sidelines while our country is crippled by a myriad of challenges. It means working to close the gap between the excessively rich and the debilitatingly poor. It means that we do things differently, repudiating bad examples by our leaders. It means we take to heart the shocking revelations at the Zondo Commission into state capture and refuse to facilitate deals, whether in the private or public sector, which are morally reprehensible and corrupt. It means we don't shrug our shoulders when we hear that corruption has cost our country 1.5 trillion between 2014 and 2019. Moral courage demands that we are not tempted to turn a blind eye to wrongdoing. Whether it is a traffic officer willing to make an offense disappear or a government official who offers to make a bureaucratic process run smoothly in return for money. Moral courage demands a great deal, but none of it is extraordinary or unrealistic. It simply means being humane and doing what is right. It means going back to the communities that raised you and seeing if there is something that you can do to help one school learner become successful. Imagine what difference it would make if each of us just helps along one child. Moral courage also means being willing to be agents of change, to stand up when you come across violence against women and children, hate speech, intolerance against foreigners, unfairness or injustice. If we all display moral courage, we can begin to repair the brokenness of our society and reknit its moral fiber into a strong, steady net that holds us all together. We must be our brothers and our sisters' keepers. Through courage, moral courage, we can make a difference in South Africa. Your generation can play a significant role in creating a better society. Your parents' generations, your grandparents' generation, and those who went before them all stepped up to overcome huge, seemingly impossible challenges. Against enormous odds, they made extraordinary sacrifices, defeated a cruel and evil system, liberated our nation, and birthed a democratic nation. I have no doubt that you can show similar moral courage, resilience, and determination, and overcome our current challenges, including the moral courage, dare I say, to push back on gender-based violence and femicide. I believe that you can not only make the difference necessary to create a new, better society, but you can be the difference. So dear friends, God bless you as you go out into the world and work for the betterment of all humankind and the preservation of our environment. Once again, heartiest congratulations.
UWC graduates, parents, guardians, and loved ones, colleagues, our virtual guests, welcome to our virtual graduation, and congratulations to all the students who will be graduating over the next few days. This is the second year that we've had to change the way we usually do things, and I personally really miss seeing the excited faces of our students and the proud expressions of their parents, their guardians, and their loved ones. I look forward to the time when I will once again see our graduates walk across the stage and hear the ululating ring through the main hall. But we all know why we cannot do things the normal way. Our lives have changed so much over the past 2 years as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to make its presence felt in a real, a devastating and a stressful way. To those of you who have lost loved ones, those of you that have seen others struggle to recover from COVID-19, my heartfelt condolences, and I wish you great strength to continue living your lives as normally as you can. I also want to applaud you for keeping on the path that led you to this day, because I'm sure that for many of you, it has been 2 years of exceptional hardship and sacrifice, with little face-to-face engagements with your lecturers and without the benefit of a campus setting. Well done to all of you for persevering. Usually when graduation falls within Women's Month, I speak of gender equality, I speak of its absence, and I speak of the great need for its existence in every place across the world. I then talk about the millions of women in our country and elsewhere who remain oppressed and vulnerable on so many levels, and this includes physically, mentally, and economically. This time, however, I feel it is important to deviate and speak of a different kind of equality that is required in South Africa right now. When I look back on my own life, I know that my generation grappled with the big questions of our day, the might of the apartheid regime, and whether we would see freedom in our lifetime. We wanted for equality for all who lived in this beautiful land, and for every single citizen to enjoy the same rights, the same benefits, and the same privileges. During our struggle, comrades and friends fell and lost their lives in their determination to see the end of apartheid. We knew back then that the strength of our convictions and the courage to persevere would be tested to its very limits. When apartheid did eventually end, we hoped that the generations born afterwards would not be asked to struggle again, that they might be truly be the born frees of our nation. I am here, however, to ask you to continue the struggle and to act with the strength of your convictions and the courage of those who have come before you. Your struggle will neither be an armed one, nor will it be the violent overthrow of the state. Your struggle will be so much more difficult, however, because as you graduate, your primary instinct might be to look after yourselves and those closest to you, and to spend your energy building successful careers. Many of you might consider leaving South Africa once you have gained experience to build lives elsewhere. You have sacrificed and you have put in the time throughout your studies to now want to reap the rewards of those sacrifices. So what precisely am I asking of you today? You will have seen the violence in part of South Africa recently, the looting and the mayhem that destroyed lives and businesses. We featured on global networks, not for the beauty of our land or our successes, but rather for our failures and disgrace. The global networks carried images of a desperate mother throwing her toddler off a roof into the waiting arms of a crowd below because the building she was in had been set alight. These networks showed South Africans running amok, grabbing and stealing goods out of stores, pulling heavy furniture through looting crowds. That is how the world saw us, a nation of looters. The scenes we saw in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal told many stories. It told us of criminality, yes, but it also tells us of poverty and desperation. It tells us of immense anger among our people, and ultimately it told us that we are a society frayed at the edges. And this is my call to you today. Become part of a new struggle. Rebuild our country. Use your talents, your determination, and your courage to fight for real freedom in our lifetime. Economic freedom and an end to poverty. Make it your mission in life to reach out your hands to those who have been left behind and pull them up with you. Leave no one behind on the battlefield of poverty. Use your success to inspire others in the villages, the townships, and the towns where you grew up. Start an alumni club that sponsors young people to become graduates. Intervene where you find a teenager struggling with the subjects that you are good at. Create an education stockpile in your community. Importantly, demand better leadership from those whom we have put in power to lead this country. Refuse to glance away from corrupt practices, insist on ethical behavior, and use the power of your voice by uniting with others who want to see a better South Africa. As I said before, this struggle is not an armed one. It merely asks that you stand up for what is right and strengthen the country of your birth with your skills, your talents, and your commitment. I believe in you. I also believe that you share the resilience, determination, and pride that this university of ours embodies. We are proud of you and of what you have achieved, and we know that you will continue making us proud. I wish you great success and good fortune as you enter this new chapter in your life's journey. Go well. Thank you.
By the authority vested in me, I shall now admit the candidates who are presented to me and appear in the graduation booklet to degrees, diplomas, and certificates in the university.
The University of the Western Cape takes pleasure in conferring an honorary doctorate on Alan Aubrey Busak.
Good morning, everybody. My heartiest congratulations to the students who graduate today, to their friends, their families, their loved ones. I think it is an extraordinary achievement. The past year has been so difficult. COVID has been so disruptive. And as a teacher myself, I have seen how students have not been able to make it because of the pressures of the virus and how many of them had to set their studies aside. You, however, have persevered, and here we are today. And so, congratulations, and I'm so grateful to be able to join you on this wonderful occasion. I'm deeply grateful to the University of the Western Cape for giving me the honor of conferring upon me this honorary doctor's degree. When the news first broke, somebody asked me, you already have, 14 degrees, what would another one make any difference? And I thought about it. And normally speaking, you would say, no, another one would not make any difference, but this one does. It does because it is UWC, and that makes it special. This is not just my alma mater. This is the place where I started a most significant phase in my own ministries. Also the place in 1976 where I entered the arena of national politics and joined the struggle of our people for justice and freedom. It is special because this is a place where a generation of students had found themselves an academic home, and they made of this academic home, over the course of a decade or more, the home of the revolution in the Western Cape and the heartbeat of the struggle in our country and also on the international arena. The students in those days who were the congregation members of my little chapel just on the other side here were an extraordinary group of people coming from all over the country. They would gather here, they would share with one another, they would be fired up for the cause of justice. They would take that fire into the rural areas wherever they came from, as far as Namibia, and wherever they went, they took the vision with them, they took their fire with them, they took their commitment with them, they took their hope with them, and all those communities became involved, so that by the time we got to the 1980s, the whole country was on fire. UWC's place in that whole process is undisputable. Those were students, and I think of them often, and I wonder, why did they do it? Here was young people with their own aspirations, their hopes, their joys, their dreams for themselves and for their families and for their lives. And yet they were quite willing to put it all at risk, to even give it all up for the sake of the struggle for justice. And I often thought, we could not promise them that by the end of this year the struggle would be over, or that by next year you guys would be safe, return to your studies, get your degrees and get yourself a life. We couldn't do that. They saw the 1 week next to them, their comrades being killed. They were tear gassed, they were taken to prison, some of them, and many of them were tortured. We went from funeral to funeral, and yet the very next week they would be out on the streets fighting that same battle. And they did not fight it for themselves. There were no guarantees. They did it because of their love for their people, and they did it because they took a hand in history, and they did it because of the next generation. If we can't see this ourselves, they were saying to themselves, the next generation will see it. I think that is extraordinary. And that is what UWC has come to mean to me. And that is how great this honor is that you bestow upon me today, because it is caught up in all these wonderful memories and all these realities that help to shape my life and to shape the life of a whole generation and shape the course of history in this country. And the world will never forget what UWC has meant, has become to be in the hearts of the students, in the parents, in the hearts of the communities, and those across the world who remember these days and who look to these days now for inspiration for their own struggles today. So thank you, UWC, for then. Thank you, UWC, for what you are now. Thank you, UWC, for bringing me once again into the heart of this marvelous institution and the future it is working out for itself and for our people and for the country.
The University of the Western Cape takes pleasure in conferring an honorary doctorate on Zoe Charlotte Wickham.
It is a great honor to be here today, albeit virtually. 53 years ago, I graduated from UWC, then a bush college designated for coloureds, even ones with average matric results, like myself. Like many from black homes, I was the first in my family to go to university. There was a stigma attached to bush, and justifiably so. Some teachers simply read out the UNISA lecture notes that we regurgitated in exams. There were no seminars or tutorials, and the only black lecturer was Adam Small. The very notion of education was undermined by being a separate community designed to foster coloured identity. But the policy consumed itself from within and produced dissent. Herded together, as were all ethnic colleges, we felt its pathology. We questioned the silence of our parents, cowed by draconian laws. But we could speak to each other without the racial, inferior-superior opposition that apartheid fostered. And in the Eastern Cape, Steve Biko was well ahead of us in inspiring black students to act. Thus, education asserted itself. After all, the Bush colleges transformed themselves against the vision of apartheid. It was my first lesson in irony, that remarkable trope that undermines the given and overturns received opinion. Irony's second lesson, the very coloured homogeneity that made it possible to decolonise the mind could itself be questioned. For instance, the opposition between English and Afrikaans speakers too could be overthrown. We could celebrate not only our bilingualism, but also our bidialectism, as Adam Small demonstrated in his creative works. Since then, transformed by Jake Scherwel into a multilingual, deracialized home of the left, UWC, as in this last decade, also of course participated in the new decolonization project. But higher education nowadays is still considered in terms of economic and social advancement. How much more joyful if we could think of graduation in more ambitious terms, as a step towards broadening knowledge, as a platform from which to build self-confidence, which is to say, the confidence to disrupt, to challenge received opinions, and to embrace difference, race, gender, class, and nationality. South Africa, with its many cultures and languages, offers unique opportunities to widen our experience and reassess social practices, to think of knowledge in more creative terms, as a tool for further social transformation. Then our degrees would give us the confidence to consider also the displaced peoples of the world, to address poverty and inequalities, and to open our minds, which also means opening our arms to welcome the stranger. Gentlemen and ladies, Vice-Chancellor, I am thrilled to receive an honorary doctorate from UWC. Thank you for this great honour. And special thanks to the English department who recommended me, and where decolonisation of the curriculum had already begun in the 1990s, when I had the privilege of teaching there.
Following the pioneering work of Denise Ackerman, Gustav Baum and Dirkie Smit, there has been a long-standing interest at UWC in studying Christian spirituality, while also recognizing how such spirituality nourishes theological reflection. In this study, Robert Maranki revisits the classic interplay between the prophet and the mystic. He carefully describes and compares two contemporary expressions of contemplative spirituality, namely that of Thomas Keating, 1923 to 2018, and Henry Nouwen, 1932 to 1996. While Keating embodies a life of contemplation, Nouwen embodies a contemplative life. Maranki addresses a pertinent question for both, namely whether and to what extent their life of contemplation is consistent with their view on the contemplative life. He outlines the significance of this interplay for contemplative spirituality in the South African context and also for his own ministry.
Investigating the relevance of quality measurement indicators for South African higher education libraries. Using a number of theoretical approaches such as input, process, output, total quality management, gap analysis theory, and the customer knowledge cycle, the candidate demonstrates the importance of a user-based approach. Ms. Nchunche Machaya's findings suggest the need to adopt quality measurement indicators which go beyond the current ones as adopted by the Committee for Higher Education Librarians of South Africa, or CHELSA. The current measures as used by CHELSA were designed to identify the gaps between customer expectations and experiences. The findings of this study indicate that users' perceptions of library service quality are also important. This study, no doubt, will contribute to a body of knowledge in shaping quality and accreditation processes of higher education libraries.
Chancellor, the candidate Ernest Maruping Pepeng will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Zimbabwe Rhodesia, Writing Home, Space, Place, Mobility and Diasporic Identity in Selected Novels. This study of 5 Zimbabwean novels explores what it means to be at home in a place and how unhomeliness obliges movement to new places imagined to be better. Paradoxically, idealized host space frequently is experienced as estranging, and subjects need to negotiate creative ways of turning host space into home space. The sense of being at home is deeply constitutive of individual, cultural, and national identity. Protagonists use memory, music, and digital communication technologies, among other techniques, to create and recreate homes and identities. For female protagonists, homemaking seems especially fraught. The thesis provocatively considers Rhodesian settler placemaking as a reverse diaspora and includes a short story which extends ideas considered in the research component.
Verwijst abstract the intellectual origins of the Khoisan revival movement and ties it to the present-day consciousness of those who participate in the revival. It follows this trend through both popular and academic debates about the history, origin and politicization of the movement and identity. The thesis is a well-crafted ethnographic inquiry and effectively applies reflexivity and other methods such as deep listening. The topic of the thesis is timely and relevant, and questions of indigeneity have become key in the social and cultural landscape of South Africa. The theories deployed in the thesis do not simply echo the statements of their progenitors, but the candidate engages with each in a manner that produces a unique contribution to the field.
Chancellor, the candidate Tumelo Asagai will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Supervision and Trust in Community Health Worker Programs at Scale, Developing a District-Level Supportive Supervision Framework for Ward-Based Outreach Teams in Northwest Province, South Africa. In the South African context, the absence of supportive supervision guidance for community health worker programs has led to varied practices. Tumelo's PhD sought to develop a supportive supervision framework for community health workers by exploring mechanisms that generate trust and enhance performance in one district of the Northwest Province. The study demonstrated the need to design supervisory systems collaboratively in ways that translate experiences and theory into locally owned practices. The study also emphasized the need to promote relationships and generate trust between community health workers and other actors in the health system. The process of engagement and building relationships proved to be more significant than the supportive supervision framework itself. Chancellor, the candidate Fidel Kanyimbo Mukinda will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Forms and Functioning of Local Accountability Mechanisms for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, a case study of Gaetsebande District, South Africa. Fidel Mukinda's PhD explored the forms and functioning of accountability mechanisms for maternal and child health in a South African district health system. His research documented the crowded and overlapping nature of performance accountability demands on frontline providers, creating operational confusion and reporting overloads. His thesis further identified the importance of actors, complex relational networks, and collaborative action as key enablers in the functioning of accountability. His thesis argues for nurturing spaces of multi-directional accountability in local health systems through governance practices that integrate learning and continuous improvement, promote teamwork between professions and levels of care, and actively engage labour unions and communities. Chancellor, the candidate Ida Lisa Anyango Okeyo will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Intersectoral Collaboration During Policy Formulation and Early Implementation, the case of the First 1,000 Days Initiative in the Western Cape Province. Early childhood development programs require intersectoral collaboration, but achieving this is challenging. Ida Okeyo's PhD examined intersectoral collaboration in the adoption and implementation of the First 1,000 Days policy in the Western Cape Province. Using health policy analysis methods, she documented the constraints and possibilities of collaboration amongst different sectors and organizations over the stages of the policy process. Her PhD shows how intersectoral action was impacted by competing ideas, divergent actor interests, and institutional weaknesses. Her PhD also reveals instances where collaboration was enabled by deliberative processes to develop a common definition of policy problems and solutions, mechanisms of collaborative governance, and facilitatory leadership.
Mabibu Yahaya conducted a study to evaluate the effects of devolution of ART program from external to local NGOs in Kano State in Nigeria. The findings shed light on the devolution failure and its consequences on ART program performance. The study contributed to the body of knowledge by describing required policy and strategic environments needed to foster sustainability. The study developed an integrative model that combines factors associated with employee readiness and ART service delivery performance factors that are likely to contribute to better performance of devolved ART services in Nigeria and other sub-Saharan countries that are currently going through the same process. The model includes integration of donor programs into the health systems, strong coordination, ownership of political will, and increased budgetary allocation.
The candidate, Dr. Susan Chandler, will now be introduced. Her PhD title is The Development of a New Scientific Adult Dental Age Estimation Method from a Sample of the Population of the Western Cape, South Africa. Dr. Susan Chandler's study relates to forensic dentistry. Accurate age estimation with teeth helped to narrow the possible identities from missing people. The aim of this study was to develop a new, more meaningful and accurate method of adult dental age estimation that can be used for both forensic anthropology and routine forensic dental identification of unidentified human remains. The objectives achieved in this study were the true age correlation with the ratio of pulp to dentine size by measuring it on periapical radiographs. She modified the Gustafson's method by applying a newly developed stereomicroscopic metric measurement method to 5 of the age-related dental criteria, in other words, attrition, secondary dentine, periodontal attachment, cementum deposition, and root dentine translucency. This new method added dentine and pulp ratios as criteria.
Chancellor, the candidate Karel Daniel Jansen van Vuren will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Contemporary Leadership Behavior Enabling Leadership Effectiveness in a Public University. The significance of the study by Mr. Karel Jansen van Vuren is the potential contribution to the leadership theory and insights for leaders in higher education institutions to be effective in the face of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Based on the theoretical and empirical findings of key leadership characteristics and influential factors, the study provides a model for effective leadership under VUCA conditions. Of profound importance is the premise that the effective leadership does not only depend on the leader's characteristics, competencies, and experiences, but equally and simultaneously on a conducive work environment. Recommendations for the university executive to better develop leaders and create an enabling environment for the effective leadership to navigate VUCA are provided.
Chancellor, the candidate CPM Madibi will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Evaluating the Impact of Facility and Household Level Factors on Early Learning Development in Philippi, Western Cape. Despite research showing the benefits to societies of early interventions in preschooling, many ECD facilities in poor communities have not been able to access government resources to improve their services and outcomes. The study investigated the extent to which ECD facility level factors like registration status as well as household level factors impact on early learning of poor learners in Philippi, Cape Town. The study found that there are no socioeconomic differences between children who attend registered facilities and those who attend unregistered facilities. There are, however, significant quality differences between registered and unregistered facilities, with the former being better off than the latter, partly due to registered facilities receiving a subsidy from government.
This is the citation record of the PhD thesis titled Effects of Microcredit on Beneficiaries' Livelihood Improvement, a case study of Engage Now Africa, ENA in Ghana. This PhD study argues that the provision of financial resources has significant effects on beneficiaries' asset accumulation. The thesis has important socioeconomic implications regarding the role of various integrated individual assets in livelihood improvements. Thesis results show that through their participation in the program, beneficiaries have power to control the use of loans as intended, which is linked to the vulnerability approach of poverty. Conclusively, the thesis argues that the contextual factors had significant effect on voluntary savings. Furthermore, asset accumulation is significantly affected by the microcredit beneficiaries' level of education and financial training. In summary, the study posits that through participation in microcredit, misunderstanding had increased between beneficiaries and their families, and if not addressed, can become a barrier for livelihood improvement. Thank you.
The title of this thesis is International Migration and Social Welfare Policies, Assessing the Effect of Government Grants on the Livelihoods of Migrants in Cape Town, South Africa. Jonas conducted his doctoral research in Cape Town, South Africa, where he critically examined the interplay between international migration and social welfare policies. The research was situated within three bodies of theoretical work: the human rights-based approach, roles theory of social justice, and sustainable livelihoods. A mixed methods research design was adopted for the study. Using statistical models and thematic analysis, the candidate assessed the challenges and constraints which migrants face when accessing social grants in South Africa. His thesis provides suggestions and recommendations as well as alternative policy options that can enhance the effectiveness of social grants and improve migrant accessibility to government assistance in South Africa.
Citation for PhD candidate Fikrawald Yenena Tamarat. Thesis title: An Assessment of Social Capital in Rural Ethiopia, the Case of Arezi and Manzi. Submitted in the fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Public Administration at the University of the Western Cape. Supervisors: Professor Lisa Thompson, Principal Supervisor, and Dr. Meren Okabandrias, Co-Supervisor. Fikrawald Tamarat's dissertation tackles the critical questions of how social capital is built and distributed within societies through social networks, volunteer associations, as well as different forms such as generalized and particularized trust and norms of reciprocity. Building social capital lies at the heart of deeply embedded societal democracy. Understanding social capital is thus central to democratic development. Fikrawald's focus on how social capital is constructed in rural Ethiopia is a vitally important contribution to both the academic and policy debates on the topic in the African context. Fikrawald's bold contribution to the analysis of social capital is his unique focus on uncovering how political and economic conditions in rural Ethiopia shape the different forms of social capital at different levels. Both Dr. Okabandrias and myself would like to commend Fikrawald for completing his PhD during arduous circumstances during lockdown in rural Ethiopia. This is a commendable achievement, and we wish you all the best in your future academic career.
This study is an evaluation of the Science and Indigenous Knowledge Systems Project, SIFS, at a Western Cape University in South Africa. It used Tafelberg's 2003 and Cuba and Lincoln's 1989 evaluation models to guide it within a constructivist, pragmatist paradigm. The findings showed that SIFS enhanced the 22 in-service teachers and teacher educators' ability to implement the then new curriculum using a dialogical argumentation instructional model, DAME, for integrating science and IK in their classroom, as well as enhanced their professional development, instructional practices, and research capabilities. All the examiners commended the originality, the thoroughness, and comprehensibility of the thesis and recommended that it should be published as an exemplary program evaluation research.
Edward William Dames's PhD thesis is entitled Towards a Marxist Critique of the Political Economy of Higher Education in South Africa post-1994. South Africa's post-apartheid transition witnessed the ascendancy of neoliberalism that initiated the privatization of its public services, which radically altered the definition of universities and their commitments to unobstructed intellectual inquiry and deliberation. Based on new Gramscian insights, a historical dialectical materialist methodology was applied to examine the proliferation of new liberal hegemony in South Africa's higher education institutions in relation to the historical, cultural, and socio-economic forces that radically changed the higher education discourse around the world. Conclusions revealed disturbing paradoxes that frame South Africa's higher education policies. Revisiting the writings of Paulo Freire to shape a revolutionary critical pedagogy committed to engaging the working class in their struggles under capitalism is proposed as a counter-hegemonic strategy.
The title of Rona Haitembu's PhD thesis is Exploring the Namibian Inclusive Education Policy's Responses to Gender Non-Conforming Learners, a case of the Erongo region. Haitembu drew from three theories: the social identity theory, Stryker's identity theory, and Spivak's concept of othering, to coin a social identity perspective used in this study to explore the inclusive education policy's responses to gender non-conforming learners in Namibian schools. The social identity perspectives relevant to this study is its emphasis of the need for favorable self-identity and the effects of such identification on the self-concept and self-esteem of learners. The conceptualization of the social identity perspective to frame an inclusive education study is the main contribution of the study. The positioning of the study within the transformative mixed methods paradigm serves as an important contribution to the methodological stance for inclusive education studies, and the alignment of this framework to existing legal frameworks in education makes it applicable to all schools' contexts.
Sifiso Zwelisha Kanyele wrote a PhD thesis entitled Silicon Nanowires by Metal-Assisted Chemical Etching and its Incorporation into Hybrid Solar Cells. Due to its superior properties, abundance and higher efficiencies, silicon is the material of choice in the production of solar cells. However, the associated high costs of silicon processing have led to a gravitation towards alternative organic solar cells, which are cheaper and easy to process, although they suffer from stability and durability challenges. Sifiso addressed these challenges by incorporating one-dimensional silicon nanostructures into organic solar cells, which produce devices with an improved efficiency and stability. Additionally, he developed higher-end analytical tools at the National Metrology Institute of South Africa to interrogate the fundamental processes at the nanoscale, which will contribute towards a cost reduction of silicon-based solar cells.
Chancellor, the candidate Maria Katarina King will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Bioactive Actinobacteria Associated with Two African Medicinal Plants, Aloepharox and Sutherlandia frutescens. Actinobacteria are gram-positive microorganisms well known for antibiotic production. In the study, two indigenous medicinal plants, Aloepharox and Sutherlandia frutescens, were screened for bioactive actinobacteria. Over 400 strains were isolated, which included novel Streptomyces species and the rare genre Micromonospora, Emacolatopsis, and Aloactinus xanenia. Isolates displayed antimicrobial activity against several pathogenic test strains. Whole genome analysis of two Streptomyces strains revealed that they harbor the genes to produce a wide range of natural products, including antibiotics, anti-tuberculosis, anti-HIV, and anti-tumor compounds. This study highlights that actinobacteria associated with indigenous plants have the potential to produce pharmacologically important compounds.
Chancellor, the candidate Charity Mandesa Maselela. Charity will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is entitled Investigation of Socio-Demographic, Clinical and Genetic Factors Associated with Blood Pressure and Glycemic Control among Indigenous South African Adult Patients. Ms. Maselela's PhD project examined socio-demographic, clinical and genetic determinants of uncontrolled hypertension and uncontrolled diabetes mellitus among indigenous South African adult patients. The candidate's work included a comprehensive study of the association between large panels of genetic biomarkers and patient responses to hypertensive and anti-diabetic drugs. This work represents an important milestone in using epidemiological and pharmacogenomics data to guide clinicians in crafting and implementing appropriate intervention to improve clinical outcomes in people with diabetes mellitus and hypertension.
Chancellor, the candidate Hajira Musavel will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is entitled Hydrocarbon Potential of the Prince Albert Formation, ECA Group in the main Karoo Basin, South Africa. Ms. Musavel's doctoral study is based on a comprehensive geological and geochemical approach to shale gas potential evaluation of the Prince Albert Formation Eka group in the main Karoo Basin in South Africa. Outcrops and subsurface data were used in this study. Results reveal that the porosity and the TOC values of the Prince Albert Formation across the southern part of the main Karoo Basin are comparable with those of the gas-producing Marcellus Shale in the United States. Thus, the Prince Albert Formation has potential for exploitable shale gas. Furthermore, our findings have demonstrated for the first time that viable conditions for shale gas exist within the sweet spot areas of the Prince Albert Formation, which were defined for the White Hill Formation.
Chancellor, the candidate Jean-Baptiste Ngiliribanga will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Selected Antiretroviral and Antituberculosis Drug Combinations by Covalent and Non-Covalent Bonding. The treatment of HIV and TB infections have become very complicated due to the advent of drug resistance. This study offers drug combinations such as pharmaceutical co-crystals and eutectic mixtures as an alternative approach to reducing the emergence of drug resistance. Experimentally, it is not easy to produce co-crystals. However, they have provided the pharmaceutical industry with the ability to optimize the physicochemical properties of active pharmaceutical ingredients while preserving the biological activity. A total number of 18 mixed dual co-crystals and eutectic mixtures were synthesized. The solubility evaluation suggests that increase in concentration of the active ingredients in the dissolution media, allowing for better bioavailability to the patient, was achieved.
Sipelo Nkoloda wrote a PhD thesis entitled Hybrid Lead Halide Perovskite Thin Films in Solar Cells by Chemical Vapor Deposition. Solar energy is the most accessible renewable energy resource in South Africa. Therefore, novel absorber materials are required to harness the abundant solar energy through its efficient conversion to electricity by using solar cells. Perovskite thin films can perform this task with a record-breaking efficiency of more than 25%. However, perovskites are expensive to produce and are unstable when exposed to air. Sepelo's research addressed these drawbacks through the development of a low-cost deposition technique to produce perovskite thin films with superior structural and optoelectronic properties. Several international publications emanated from his research, which will open a path towards a low-cost deposition technique for the manufacturing of air-stable perovskite solar panels.
Chancellor, the candidate Eric Safu will now be introduced. The thesis of the candidate is titled Geomechanical Characterization and Reservoir Simulation of Carbon Storage Project in EM Depleted Gas Field in South Africa. In this study, Eric investigated the feasibility of carbon storage in a depleted gas field and the possible side effects from that storage in terms of leakage and possible seismic events. He found that injection of CO2 would not only result in the recovery of the last remnants of natural gas from the reservoir, ensure the stabilization of faults and fractures in the reservoir, but also offset volume reduction due to gas winning, provided it is done at a sufficiently high pressure. He furthermore found that due to the use of existing reservoir-to-shore infrastructure, this method of sequestration of CO2 would be economically viable. Several papers were published in international peer-reviewed journals, and a guideline for the geomechanical analysis of depleted fields has been developed.
The thesis of the candidate is titled Acid Mine Drainage Prediction Techniques and Geochemical Modeling, Case Study on Gold Tailing Dams, West Rand, Witwatersrand Basin Area. South Africa's acid mine drainage is identified as one of the contributors to the environmental hazards in the gold mining region of South Africa caused by the mining operational activities performed at mining industries. This study is based on acid mine drainage prediction techniques and geochemistry modeling to predict the potential acid generation of waste materials from the gold tailing dams in the West Rand area in Witwatersrand. Control strategies were devised to assess, understand, and measure the acid potential generation of waste materials in ensuring the suitable method required to analyze the risks caused by acid mine drainage to the environment. The methods encompass mineralogical and geochemical analysis, acid mine drainage prediction, test modification, and geochemical modeling. These methods were successfully applied to understand the basic mechanisms involved in controlling the acid generation, assessing prediction procedure, and selecting the right prediction tools.
Hey graduands, As part of our virtual graduation ceremony, we have created these UWC graduation social media stickers and filters to share on your Instagram and Facebook stories. It's as simple as clicking on your story, snap a pic or create a video, select the sticker icon, search for UWC Grad, select your GIF. Most importantly, tag UWC, use this year's hashtag, and share. Let's not forget about these easy-to-apply UWC filters. Go to our UWC online profile. Click on our Filter tab. Select the Graduation Frame filter. Tap to find your faculty color. Snap a pic or create a video. Most importantly, tag UWC, use this year's hashtag, and share. Congratulations on your well-deserved success. We cannot wait to see your fun UWC virtual graduation moments.
This ceremony of the University of the Western Cape is now dissolved. Le nhlangano ye-University yeNtshona Koloni ngoku ifikelele esiphelweni. Hierdie vergadering van die Universiteit van Wes-Kaapland word nou verdag.